My family meeting started like any other, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. My brothers, Jake, 31, and Matt, 26, and my sister, Lila, 24, were already glaring at me the moment I walked in. My parents, Susan and Robert, told me they needed my $300,000 apartment for the family. They said it would be better if Jake got it, and I should just sign it over. I stayed calm and said no. This apartment was the only home I had worked for, and I wasn't going to give it away. The room erupted immediately. Jake shouted at me, Matt called me selfish, and Lila just smirked like she had already won. Then it happened. Lila grabbed the cake from the table and shoved it into my face. Jake and Matt jumped in, smearing frosting everywhere while laughing. My parents just watched silently. I was left standing there, covered in cake, humiliated and furious. On the drive home, my anger turned into determination. They wouldn't just lose the chance to get my apartment. They were going to lose all the benefits they had been taking from me for years. Every loan, gift, or favor they had expected from me would end. I called my best friend, Maya Brooks, and told her what had happened. Together, we started figuring out how I could protect myself and my property. I began taking action immediately. I froze any accounts my siblings could access and made sure my apartment was secure. I documented everything and even considered legal steps if they tried to come after my property. The cake incident became a symbol in my mind, not of shame, but of betrayal and the need to finally set boundaries with my family. Even though I loved my family once, I realized I could no longer trust them. Jake, Matt, and Lila had crossed a line I would never forgive. From that day on, I vowed to protect myself and my home, and to stop letting anyone take advantage of me. That simple act of refusing to give up my apartment turned into a turning point, where I decided I was done being pushed around. I would stand my ground, reclaim my power, and never let anyone humiliate me like that again. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt a mix of relief and clarity. The cake on my face had washed away, but the lesson remained. Family doesn't always mean safety, and sometimes protecting yourself is the only way to survive. I had spent years bailing out my brothers, Jake and Matt, and my sister, Lila, from every financial mess they got themselves into. I was always the responsible one, the one everyone leaned on when they couldn't handle their own problem. Every birthday gift, loan, or emergency I covered became expected, and guilt-tripping was part of how they kept me in line. I gave because I loved them, but over time I realized love shouldn't come with constant manipulation. A few months ago, I inherited my apartment from my late Aunt Margaret. It was my first real asset, something I could call completely mine, earned and protected by my own hard work. I thought maybe this would be a turning point, a space that was only mine, but I didn't realize how much my family would try to take it. The so-called family meeting was really just a trap disguised as dinner. My parents had invited me over casually, making it sound like an ordinary night together. But as soon as I arrived, it became clear they had an agenda. Jake and Matt kept throwing sideways glances at me, and Lila had that smirk she always wore when she thought she had me cornered. My parents brought up the apartment, saying it would be better kept in the family, and hinting I should let Jake have it. I refused. I wasn't giving away my home to satisfy their sense of entitlement. That's when it all blew up. Lila grabbed the cake sitting on the table and smashed it into my face. Jake jumped in and smeared frosting on my clothes and hair, while Matt laughed like this was some kind of game. My parents didn't intervene, and I realized in that moment how little loyalty really mattered to them when the family drama was at stake. As I wiped the frosting from my face later, I thought about everything they had taken from me over the years. This was the worst betrayal yet. I had given them so much and trusted them, and now they humiliated me in front of everyone. I decided right then that it was over. No more loans, no more gifts, no more financial support. I began shutting off the accounts they had access to and cutting off any help I had been quietly providing for years. I also contacted Dan Harper, a lawyer I had trusted for years, to start drafting legal protections for my apartment. I needed to make sure this property, which meant so much to me, could never be taken from me. The cake incident wasn't just a mess to clean up. It was a warning, a signal that I needed to protect myself, my assets, and my peace of mind. By the end of the night, I felt a mix of anger and clarity. I understood the patterns of manipulation that had defined my family for years, and I realized that I couldn't let them continue. This wasn't just about money. It was about finally standing up for myself, taking control, and setting boundaries they could never cross again. The apartment became more than a place to live. It became a symbol of everything I had earned and would protect at any cost. I got a group text from Jake, Matt, and Lila acting like nothing had happened, as if the cake incident and everything that followed didn't exist. I stared at my phone for a moment, then typed back in all caps, "You will never get another dime from me." It felt good to finally say it out loud. As I sent the message, memories of that night came rushing back. Lila smashing the cake in my face, Jake smearing frosting all over my clothes, Matt laughing like it was the funniest thing he had ever seen. My parents sitting there, doing nothing, letting them humiliate me. I felt the anger flare up all over again, but this time it was sharper, more focused. I pulled up a list I had been keeping for years. Every loan I had given them, every gift I had covered, every time I had helped them when they couldn't manage their own money. I totaled it all and started drafting invoices, putting clear deadlines for repayment. I sent them carefully, making sure they couldn't ignore it, but I didn't hear anything serious back, just laughter from Jake, jokes from Matt. They thought it was all a game. I realized jokes wouldn't work anymore, so I filed claims in small claims court. Suddenly, their laughter turned into panic. Jake had to scramble to figure out where to get the money, calling friends and even selling things he had refused to part with before. Matt started avoiding my calls entirely, probably hoping I would forget about it. Lila tried her usual tricks, sending long, emotional messages about family and forgiveness, but this time I didn't respond. I had learned my lesson. Emotional manipulation didn't work on me anymore. The next step was protecting my apartment. I changed all the locks, making sure none of them could walk in uninvited. The place that had been my refuge, my inheritance, now felt like a fortress, safe from their schemes and their sense of entitlement. Every key, every code, every access point was mine and mine alone. I also realized I needed to cut all contact. No phone calls, no texts, no social media messages, nothing. It was difficult at first, the silence felt strange, but it was necessary. Without boundaries, I knew they would have continued to take advantage of me, trying to guilt me into giving them more. Now, with no way to reach me, they were forced to deal with the consequences of their own actions. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control and the cake incident had been a turning point, a brutal wake-up call, but it became the moment I drew a line in the sand. I wasn't just protecting my apartment or my money, I was protecting myself. Every text, every invoice, every locked door was a statement that I was done letting them manipulate me. I had finally realized that the family I loved wasn't the family I could trust. I had taken my power back, and there was no going back to the way things were. The cake incident, the lies, the manipulation, all of it had led to this moment of clarity. I was free, and I intended to keep it that way. I started taking action. First, I called Jake's workplace to begin wage garnishment. He had no idea I had the legal right to do it, and I loved watching him panic as they told him the process had started. Next, I contacted Lila's landlord about the unpaid rent on the lease she had me co-sign. It wasn't my problem anymore, and I wasn't going to keep covering for her mistakes. Then I went through the family heirlooms that had been given to me for safekeeping over the years. I sold the items I didn't need. It felt like finally reclaiming what was mine, and I made sure Jake, Matt, and Lila knew. When Jake called me a monster, I laughed and called him a thief. The anger they had caused me over the years was finally being reflected back at them. Maya, my best friend, uploaded the cake video online. Within hours, it went viral. Strangers were commenting, sharing, and calling out my siblings for their behavior. Public opinion quickly turned against Jake, Matt, and Lila. People I didn't even know were messaging me, supporting me, and sharing their own family betrayal stories. The gossip spread through my parents' circle too. Susan and Robert's friends began avoiding them, and the shame on their faces was almost satisfying. I received a text from my mother begging me to take the video down. I simply ignored it. I wasn't going to erase proof of what they had done. The world needed to see the truth, and I wasn't backing down. While all this chaos was unfolding, I started building a life outside of my toxic family. I joined a new social circle, made friends who actually respected me, and surrounded myself with people who cared about me for who I am, not what I could give them. I realized just how much happier life could be without constant manipulation and lies. Every action I took made me feel stronger. I wasn't just getting revenge, I was reclaiming my life and my peace. I had spent years bending to their demands, paying their bills, and covering for their mistakes. Now, I was free to make decisions that were good for me and only me. Watching my family flounder while I thrived was bittersweet. Part of me felt sad that they had revealed themselves as untrustworthy, but another part was relieved. I no longer had to pretend everything was fine or forgive things that never should have happened. Life outside that toxicity felt lighter, freer, and more rewarding. By the time the dust settled, I knew I had made the right choice. Jake, Matt, and Lila learned consequences the hard way, and I finally had the life I deserved. I had my apartment, my freedom, and a new circle of friends who actually cared. It was the first time in years I felt truly safe, truly respected, and truly happy. After the cake incident, I felt humiliated and ashamed. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the laughter, the frosting, and the shock of realizing my own family had turned against me. It was hard to face anyone, even my closest friends, because I couldn't stop thinking about how they could act that way. Maya reminded me that family isn't always safe, and sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most. She told me that toxic behavior often hides behind love and that I needed to protect myself. Her words stuck with me. I realized I had spent so many years putting my family first, forgiving them constantly, and covering for their mistakes, even when it hurt me. I started seeing a therapist, and those sessions opened my eyes to years of favoritism and unfair treatment. It became clear that my parents, especially Mom, had always prioritized Jake, Matt, and Lila. I had been expected to sacrifice, help, and step aside, while my siblings made mistakes without consequence. All those childhood memories of being pushed aside, bullied, or ignored started making sense. I began journaling every night. Writing down my thoughts helped me organize my feelings and see patterns I had ignored for years. I wrote about the cake incident, about my siblings' constant demands, and about the small but constant ways I had been hurt by their selfishness. I also wrote about the ways I had allowed it to continue, recognizing that I had the power to change my life. I recalled moments from childhood when Jake, Matt, and Lila had made fun of me or excluded me from games, family trips, and even small family traditions. Those memories came flooding back, and I realized the cake incident wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a lifelong pattern of bullying and manipulation. I saw how my mom had enabled it, defending them when I complained and minimizing my feelings. Susan's behavior had allowed my siblings to continue mistreating me, and I understood that they had no intention of changing. The realization was painful but also freeing. I didn't have to wait for apologies or change from them. My family tried love bombing me afterward, sending messages, calling me, and trying to convince me that everything was fine, that they were sorry, and that I should forgive them. But I knew it was manipulation. I refused to respond to the texts or return their calls. I wasn't falling for it. I decided it was time for a fresh start. I moved to a new city, taking my apartment with me, and began building a life separate from the toxicity. I focused on my job, my friends, and my own happiness. Living somewhere new gave me space to heal and gain confidence. Since moving, I never attended another Collins family gathering. I didn't need their validation, their drama, or their control over my life. I started creating boundaries, learning to say no, and prioritizing myself. The shame I felt slowly faded, replaced by strength and self-respect. I finally felt free. I had my home, my independence, and my peace. I realized that leaving my toxic family behind didn't make me a bad person. It made me someone who valued her own life and happiness. I didn't have to be part of their games anymore, and that was the most powerful feeling I had ever experienced. I went through my bank accounts one evening and realized that Jake, Matt, and Lila still had access to a shared emergency fund I had set up years ago. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. After everything, they were still sneaking money whenever they wanted. I knew I had to act fast. I closed all the accounts immediately and canceled all the linked cards. I didn't wait to tell them. Within days, Matt's rent check bounced, and Lila's utilities were cut off. I ignored their calls, texts, and emails. Part of me expected them to beg or apologize, but they didn't. They acted like nothing had happened, just like they always did. A few days later, my parents, Susan and Robert, showed up at my apartment unannounced. They demanded I be reasonable and give my siblings access again. I felt my blood boil. I refused to open the door at first, but when they started banging, I decided to film the confrontation on my... I wanted evidence in case things escalated. The video showed everything. My parents yelling, me staying calm, and my refusal to let them manipulate me. Seeing it again later reminded me why I couldn't go back to the way things were. The memory of the cake incident, the laughter, the humiliation, it all fueled my resolve. I promised myself I would never allow them to control me again. With Dan's help, I filed for a restraining order against Jake, Matt, and Lila. I made it clear that any attempt to harass or contact me would have legal consequences. It felt empowering to take control of the situation legally, finally turning the tables on them. A few weeks later, Robert admitted that Jake had gambling debts. It was no longer a secret, and it explained some of the desperation and anger during the cake incident. I realized that my family's needs were never about me. They were about covering their own mistakes. That knowledge made it easier to detach emotionally. I cut all ties permanently. I blocked their numbers, changed my email addresses, and made sure my accounts were secure. I stopped answering calls from my parents and siblings and refused to engage in any conversation that could lead to manipulation or guilt tripping. It wasn't easy at first. I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. Part of me mourned the idea of a normal family, but the other part of me felt liberated. I no longer had to worry about losing money, being humiliated, or letting them take advantage of me. Every time I thought of the cake incident, it reminded me why I had made these changes. I had turned my anger and hurt into action, protecting myself and my future. I realized I didn't owe them anything, not even a second chance. By locking down my finances and cutting all contact, I finally felt safe and free. For the first time in years, I could breathe without fear that my own family would betray me again. I knew I had done the right thing, and I was determined to never let anyone control me like that again. I hired Dan Harper, a family law attorney, to make sure my apartment was legally protected. I wanted to make absolutely sure that Jake, Matt, or Lila could never claim it, no matter what tricks they tried in the future. Dan helped me update my will and all my property documents so that everything was airtight and any future disputes would be impossible. While reviewing some paperwork, I discovered that Jake had tried to forge my signature on a property transfer. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I couldn't believe he would stoop that low. I shared everything with Dan, and he immediately started taking action. He sent cease and desist letters to Jake, Matt, and Lila, warning them that any attempt to interfere with my property or harass me would have serious legal consequences. The threat of police involvement shook them. For the first time, they realized I wasn't going to back down, and I had the law firmly on my side. Dan also suggested using the cake video as evidence of harassment. It clearly showed the humiliation they caused me, and it helped establish a pattern of abusive behavior toward me. A civil case soon began. Jake, Matt, and Lila tried to downplay their actions, but I was determined to see justice. I kept all records of loans I had given them over the years, all the financial help, and proof of their manipulation. Everything was documented, leaving them with no way to argue. After a few weeks, Jake reached out, begging to settle out of court. He claimed it would be easier for everyone if we avoided a trial. I didn't rush. I had thought carefully about what I wanted: full repayment of every loan and absolute protection of my apartment. I refused any settlement that didn't meet these terms. Dan helped me prepare a final offer. They could repay every cent I had lent them and agree to stop contacting, or we would proceed with the case. The choice was theirs. In the end, they agreed to repay the money, clearly realizing that the court would rule against them. When everything was settled, I walked away completely debt-free. Every unpaid loan had been repaid, and my apartment was legally secure. I felt a huge sense of relief, knowing that I had finally protected myself from their greed and manipulation. For years, I had been their safety net, their excuse for every bad choice, and now I had reclaimed my power. The legal process also gave me closure. I didn't have to worry about sneaky attempts to take my property, and I no longer feared their manipulation. Everything I had built for myself was safe, and I could finally live without anxiety about family betrayal. It wasn't just about money or property, it was about respect. I had learned to stand up for myself, and the law gave me the structure to enforce that. Jake, Matt, and Lila had tried to cross every line, but I had set firm boundaries and followed through. Using Dan's help, I turned the tables completely. I had proof, legal protection, and a clear record of everything they had done. Walking away from that process, I felt stronger and more confident. I had taken the ultimate step to protect myself, my home, and my future, and nothing they could do would change that. Months later, I got a message from Jake, Matt, and Lila asking me to come over to make amends. I didn't trust them, but I decided to go carefully. I brought my phone and recorded everything, knowing they could try to manipulate me again. When I arrived, they started with apologies. At first, it sounded sincere, but almost immediately, they shifted and asked for money. I couldn't believe it. I just laughed in their faces. Their fake apologies were meant to trick me into giving them what they wanted, but I wasn't falling for it. I calmly reminded them of the cake incident, repeating exactly what was said that day. I could see their faces tighten as I described every humiliating detail. Then I played the viral video on my phone. They froze, realizing that everyone online had seen how disrespectful and cruel they had been. I told them clearly to never contact me again. I didn't argue, I didn't negotiate, and I didn't give them a chance to manipulate me. I left the house without touching any of the food or interacting further. Their attempts at guilt and manipulation had no power over me anymore. A few hours later, Lila sent me a threatening text. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Officer Mark Redding, just like I had been advised, so there was a record of her harassment. I knew I was fully protected, and they couldn't scare me. Once I was back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat quietly. I finally felt calm. Months of stress, manipulation, and betrayal had been replaced with a sense of control and safety. I had set boundaries and enforced them, and for the first time in years, I could relax without worrying about family drama. I thought about how far I had come. I had faced betrayal, humiliation, and years of manipulation. I had protected my apartment, reclaimed the money they owed me, and made sure they could never harm me again. Now, I could enjoy life on my own terms. Sipping my wine, I smiled. The apartment was mine, my peace was intact, and the toxic influence of my family had no place in my life. I had learned that standing up for myself wasn't just necessary, it was freeing. The past couldn't touch me anymore. I felt stronger and more confident than ever before. Their fake apologies and threats couldn't shake me, and I knew I would never allow anyone to take advantage of me again. I had full control over my life, my space, and my future. For the first time in years, I was truly at peace, and I finally understood what freedom felt like. Maya uploaded the cake video to TikTok with a caption that said, "When your family wants your apartment." Almost instantly, it started spreading everywhere. People reacted with shock and anger, calling them the worst siblings ever. The internet exploded with comments and shares, and the video quickly went viral. Jake, Matt, and Lila tried to defend themselves online, but it only made things worse. Every post they made was met with criticism, and strangers flooded their accounts with messages telling them how cruel they had been. I stayed anonymous, quietly adding context in the comments so people could understand the full story. The support was overwhelming. People started donating to help me with my legal battle, sending small amounts that added up quickly. It felt amazing to see strangers care about what had happened to me. Meanwhile, Jake's workplace got wind of the situation. His reputation took a huge hit, and people began questioning his character and reliability. He struggled to explain himself, and it became clear that the public opinion was firmly against him. They began sending messages demanding that I take the video down. I didn't respond, and I refused. I knew that removing it would erase the proof of what they had done and give them a chance to manipulate others. I wanted the truth out there, and I wanted people to see the reality of toxic family behavior. Local news picked up the story, interviewing people who had seen the video and sharing details about Suddenly, the cake incident and the betrayal that followed were everywhere. People were discussing it in communities online and offline, and I realized my story was resonating with many who had experienced similar abuse. I started hearing from survivors of financial and emotional abuse, people who had been in situations like mine. I offered support and shared my experience, showing them that it was possible to stand up to manipulation and reclaim control over their lives. It gave me a new purpose. The viral video had done more than embarrass my sibling. It had created a platform for awareness. I used it to talk about family manipulation, the dangers of financial abuse, and how important it is to set boundaries. Every time I shared advice or answered questions, I felt stronger and more confident. The attention and support helped me heal in ways I hadn't expected. I realized that while my family had tried to bring me down, I had turned the situation into something positive. I had not only defended myself, but also helped others see that they could protect themselves too. Looking back, I understood that the viral video wasn't just revenge. It was a tool for justice, a way to show the world that standing up for yourself is never wrong. I had reclaimed my life, my apartment, and my peace while helping others do the same. I went to Susan and Robert's house one last time to collect the keepsakes I wanted. I left a short note on the table that said, "I'm done with this." It felt final and honest. After that, I blocked Jake, Matt, Lila, and my parents on every platform I had. I didn't want them to contact me in any way. I got a new phone number, so they couldn't reach me at all. I also made my apartment listing private, so no one could find my address. I spoke to my neighbor, Karen Willis, and asked her not to let anyone in without my permission. She understood completely, and it gave me peace of mind knowing I had another layer of security. The experience with my family, which had been so hurtful, slowly became a symbol of my independence. Every time I thought about it, I remembered how I had stood up for myself and refused to let my family take what was mine. It reminded me that I had the power to protect myself and make my own decisions. I focused on building a trusted circle of friends who respected me and supported me. With them, I felt safe and valued. I realized that healthy relationships mattered more than blood ties when family turned toxic. I spent time with these friends, laughing, sharing experiences, and learning that it was possible to create my own chosen family. Susan tried one last time, sending me a guilt-filled letter. I didn't even open it. I returned it to the mailbox, still sealed, because I knew I didn't need their approval or their apologies. I had already moved on, and opening it would only give them a chance to manipulate my feeling. I began to enjoy life without their interference. I could make decisions without worrying about them trying to control me or take advantage of me. Every small freedom, like choosing how to decorate my apartment or planning my weekends, felt like a victory. Locking my apartment door became a daily ritual that reminded me I was safe. It was no longer just a place to live. It was my sanctuary. I could breathe without fear or judgment, and it felt incredible. My home, my rules, my peace. Every step I took to cut off my toxic family strengthened my sense of self. I realized that letting go didn't mean I stopped loving them. It meant I chose to love myself first. I had finally drawn the line, and for the first time in a long time, I felt fully free. I smiled as I stood inside my apartment, knowing that I had reclaimed my life. The past was behind me, and the future belonged entirely to me. I was safe, happy, and in control of my own world. Do you think it was right for me to stand up for myself and protect what's mine? Or should I have trusted my family again? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you want more real-life stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.